from the grave. We're going to be talking about some of the new spoilers today. I'm going to give everyone just a second to get in here. And what we do, we're going to kind of talk on speculating. Something I enjoy doing. I use a couple ticks to buy a lot of cards. And now is the time when things start paying off. Diagraph Colossus was one of my big picks. I have quite a few. And when I got them, they were between 2 to 10 cents. And currently they're at 28. So it's pretty good. I'm going to hold on to them a little bit longer. They'll continue to probably go up with the spoiling of a solid amount of zombies. Because it was tribal. I figured the two blocks would be tribal together. And that's kind of where speculating goes. You find a card that is currently either low price because it's undervalued or low price because it doesn't currently have the backup it needs. And you buy it. Usually pretty cheap and in bulk. So you have anywhere from 4 to 20 copies. I usually don't know more than that just because there's many different cards to speculate on. You don't want 100 copies of one card in case it doesn't go. But if there's one card right now, if I sold it, I'd make about, I don't know, 5 cents, 5 times about what I paid for it. But there's other cards I have where if they went to $1, I'd make 100 times that because I bought them for a single cent. And now is the time where you decide if you wait the pre-spoiler hype, the post-spoiler hype, and the Pro Tour. And those are the 3 big times to sell. We'll get more into this on another day. Right now I want to talk about the new cards that are out. Just the ones that are pretty interesting for Standard, Modern, and other formats. We'll get to the limited review later. As always, I'll be covering the whole thing. Every color, every rare, every uncommon, the themes, all of that stuff. But today, it's about kind of what looks good for Constructed. We're starting with Permeating Mass, which is green for a 1/3. That's already great. An expected downside on green for a 1/3, honestly. Whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, that creature becomes a copy of Permeating Mass. So this card is both really cool and I think actually pretty playable. So your opponent, your opponent plays their 2/1. They're 2/1 or they're 2/2. They're 1 mana 2/2. They have a 1 mana 2/2. It's a sweet format. And it's your turn. You play your Permeating Mass. If they swing their 2/2 and your Permeating Mass, then they have a 1/3 and you have a 1/3. If they play their turn 2 3/1 and they attack their 3/1 into your 1/3, then they trade. But let's say that they have a 3/2. They attack their 3/2 into your 1/3. Your 1/3 dies, and now they have a 1/3. Which doesn't sound great until you realize you're playing this in a very defensive deck. It's either a control deck or a mid-range deck that uses flyers and or first strikers to win, or their evasive properties. This is going to be one of the stronger cards in slowing down the aggressive decks. It's fairly hard to kill. Like, a lot of the red removal does 2. A lot of the black minus stuff does 2. So that'll help out quite a bit as well. It's an interesting card. I could see it seeing play in some modern sideboards, possibly even legacy sideboards. A 1/3 for 1 is actually really good as a defensive card. Alright. We'll read Mind's Dilation. 5 white, 5 red, bleh, 5 blue, blue. Yeah, let's do it this way, actually. No, wait. Scroll bar. There we go. That's what I really wanted. What's the scroll bar? Here we go. Mind's Dilation is blue, 5, enchantment. Whenever opponent casts his or her first spell for the turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. If it's an online card, you may cast it without paying its cost. So they play a spell, the first one of their turn. On their turn, you flip over a Siege Rhino, you get to cast Siege Rhino, timing restrictions don't apply. Interesting, but a little bit random. Then nice part is it's on your turn and their turn. There might end up some sort of standard position where being the person that gets just more actual card flips matters. So maybe that could happen. I would put it as unlikely, but cool. Mirrorwing Dragon is 3 red for a 4/5 flying dragon. Mythic. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery that targets only Mirrorwing Dragon, that player copies that spell for each other creature he or she controls they could target. So let's say that you have Mirrorwing Dragon and 2 1/1 goblins. You target with an Expedite on the Mirrorwing Dragon. Well, now all 3 of your creatures have haste and you draw 3 cards. Great, right? Your beneficial spells benefit you. But the opposite, or When your opponent targets it, it's a little different. Let's say they have 3 1/1 goblins, and they go to Anguished Unmaking on it, right? So they're going to kill your creature, they're going to exile it, and they're going to lose 3 life. All 3 of their creatures are dead, and now they lost 12 life, 1 for each of their creatures. So you can't use 1-for-1 removal to kill Mirrorwing, or that's an instant or sorcery, because it'll kill all of your creatures as the person trying to kill it. Which is interesting. Some decks won't have creatures, some decks will use enchantments to kill it, and some decks will use multi-targeted things like maybe an Awaken spell to kill Mirrorwing. So it's not foolproof, but there could be definitely situations where bringing one in out of the board or having one in the main board is really powerful because specific answers have to be used against it or it will wreck your opponent's board. I don't think it's a card you're going to build around a whole lot, although you do have Zada and Mirrorwing Dragon, so that's pretty cool that you have 2 options. Grim Flayer is really solid. Black-green for a 2/2 human warrior. Okay, mythic. He has Trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put any number into your graveyard and the rest on top of your library in any order. So it's a Delirium activator as well as card quality. You get to look at the top 3 cards and realize that you need a land and put that instant and sorcery into your graveyard and put the land back on top of your library. Now you're going to draw land next turn. Great. You're controlling your draws. That's a powerful effect. Delirium, it gets +2/+2. So mid and late game, this is going to be a 4/4 for 2. Early game, it's a 2/2 trample, which is a little odd, but we'll see some other cards later, specifically the Liliana Planeswalker, that'll work pretty well with that. The thing is, Grim Flayer is either a great card because the Delirium aggressive deck comes together, or it's just not a card that you're playing over Sylvan Advocate if the Delirium deck doesn't come together. So it is a piece to the synergy puzzle, and if synergy, aggro Delirium, with things like Mindrack Demon, Grim Flayer, and some other cards that we're going to talk about later, come together, then we have a powerful green-black aggressive Delirium deck. And if we don't, I don't think you normally want Grim Flayer, although it wouldn't be terrible to run maybe some amount in a more defensive 3-color Delirium deck, just having the option to have a 2-mana 4/4 that can also let you leave up a counterspell or removal later on. Alright. Ride Down is back, but I don't think that's particularly important. White and a red instant, destroy target blocking creature. Creatures that were blocked by that creature gain trample until the turn. Interesting, but I don't think it's going to make the cut. Morn Willow, 1 green black for a 3/2 haste plant skeleton. Delirium, creatures with power 2 less can't block this turn. This could be a 1 or 2 of in the green-black aggressive deck, just because stopping your opponent from blocking with tokens is pretty powerful. Something like Secure the Wastes prevents, so they can't block even if they play something like Secure the Wastes. Other than that situation, I don't really see it too great. Alright, so the merged creatures that have been coming out all have win their cast abilities. And I actually think this one's pretty solid. Lashweed Lurker is 8 for a 5/4 when you cast it. Put a non-land permanent on top of its owner's library, and it emerges for 5 green-blue. So remember, you can deduct from the colorless by sacrificing a creature, and that converted mana cost is deducted off it. So if you have a 4-drop, it makes it cost 1 green-blue. If you have a 5-drop, it makes it cost green-blue. The reason I say that these are good is that Emerge cards so far all have cast abilities, and chaining them together will be pretty powerful. I'm not sure if we'll be all in on Emerge and there'll be an Emerge deck, but it's potentially something that could happen because Emerge plays well with itself, right? I mean, if I play a Lashweed Lurker and then I have another one in hand, I get to play green-blue for my 5/4 and put another creature or another permanent on top of your library. So I'm not even losing a card because the Lashweed Lurker buys me a card. Let's keep going. Some cool draft cards later. Cryptbreaker is black for a 1/1 zombie. Rare. 1 in the black, tap, discard a card. Put a 2/2 black zombie creature onto the battlefield. Now it's not tapped, it's untapped, and that's important because you can tap 3 untapped zombies you control, draw a card, and you lose 1 life. Awesome. So you can use that effect tapping itself the first turn it comes in, because it doesn't actually have a direct tap effect for the tap 3 zombies, all that kind of stuff. But Cryptbreaker both provides you an army, provides you card advantage to get back to build more of an army, and plays extremely well with Diagraph Colossus. Diagraph Colossus serves as the 2 and a black for the 2/2, and whenever you cast a zombie, you put a 2/2 black zombie into play. Also, when it enters the battlefield, the Diagraph Colossus gets a 1/1 counter for each zombie in your graveyard. So both of these cards play good early and play good late, and both of them make multiple zombies, and this one lets you turn those zombies into direct card advantage to get more zombies. So with just a Cryptbreaker and a Diagraph Colossus, you get to probably draw 1 to 2 cards extra a turn. You can make extra 2/2s, and if you cast any number of zombies, you get to get an additional one off the Diagraph Colossus, which is a pretty powerful effect. Also, discarding not necessarily a strict downside with Madness, so there's a lot of potential in Cryptbreaker. We'll see if a 1-mana 1/1 is good enough. I don't think it'll have the legs to go anywhere other than in Standard. I don't think there's a zombie deck in Modern. Alright, we've got a new burn spell here. Incendiary Flow is 1 red sorcery. It deals 3 damage to target creature or player, so it is a Lightning Hammer? Fire Hammer? Lightning Hammer? Lightning Hammer. If it would deal damage, if a creature is dealt damage this way, exile instead. Exiling's relevant clause helps with things like delirium, or preventing it, and certain creatures that reanimate, or counting certain types. And just being a 2-mana burn spell, 2-mana 3 damage burn spell is good enough. You're basically going to see these in lists everywhere. They're just going to be played. It's Standard only. There's better options in other formats. Deploy the Gatewatch. 4 white for sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards. Put up to 2 planeswalkers from among them in the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Okay, so 6 mana to look at 7 cards, and you can put 2 planeswalkers into play. Up to. Now, obviously, you don't want to put copies into play because one will go to your graveyard unless you want planeswalkers in your graveyard for some reason. So, Frank Karsten and some other people already did the math. 28 planeswalkers is what you need to run to have an excellent chance of getting 1 and a solid chance of getting 2. Now, you only need to get 1 6-mana planeswalker for it to be solid. If you're getting a Chandra or a Sorin, you basically got a Chandra Sora with a slight upside in that you can get more, and a slight downside in that you can miss. The problem is I don't know a deck that wants to run 28 Planeswalkers, or what colors I'm running to run 28 Planeswalkers, but maybe there's some sort of weird Planeswalker decks coming from Deploy the Gatewatch. I don't think so, but I'm sure people will try it in Standard, and somebody hopefully will figure out something cool with it. Selfless Spirit is 1 and a white for a 2/1 flying. It's okay, but not great. Sacrifice it. Creatures you control gain indestructible. That is good. It's pretty good in Standard, but it's potentially a card to slot into Modern, sort of green-white hate-bear type decks. And you could even see play in Legacy, although rats are less common in Legacy, so it's not quite as high, but it stops Pyroclasms. That's the big thing about it, is that you can play your 1-drop, play a Selfless Spirit, and have protection from that, but maybe it'll see play with Aether Vial decks, Death and Taxes could really use a way to... Your opponent plays a Pyroclasm or any kind of effect like that, you tap your Vial on 2, put in your Selfless Spirit, sacrifice it, counter the spell. It's pretty good. The problem is I don't want to play a 2/1 flyer on its own, so I definitely need to be getting advantage out of the ability. But an Evasive Body is not terrible. So I think that card could see some play in sideboards across multiple formats, and possibly main board play in Standard. Alright, we got a new Oath because Liliana is part of the Gatewatch now. 2 and a black for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. At the beginning of each end step, if a planeswalker into the battlefield, put a 2/2 black zombie creature onto the battlefield. 2 things going on here. It's just a sacrifice effect straight up if you're not running many creatures, which is at odds with the fact that it makes 2/2s later on. The second one's usually going to get your 2/2. But that 2/2 also enters the battlefield untapped. So you play Liliana, and the next turn, let's say you play Gideon. Well, your Gideon is probably going to make a 2/2. And now you have 2 2/2s protecting it. Or whatever planeswalker you put in, you have at least 1 2/2 protecting it. I think this is probably the best effect on all of the oaths for when you actually play the Planeswalker, because a 2/2 is very powerful. I think it will stay standard play, and there could be a potential future where it saw some modern play, because both sides are okay, but I think it's too slow and too weak for modern. But I definitely see it seeing standard play if there's some sort of sweet Planeswalker decks. Alright. Nephalia Academy is a land, uncommon. If a spell or ability your opponent controls makes you discard a card, you may reveal that card and put it on top of your library instead of anywhere else. And tap to add colorless. So, the big thing here is that, if your opponent duresses you, or Hymn-to-Tarax you, or makes you discard your whole hand, you choose how many of those cards go to the graveyard, and how many of those cards go on top of your library, and in which order. Now, your opponent also knows which order because you revealed them. And effects that care about cards being discarded still go off because they are discarded. You're just changing whether they go from the graveyard. They're discarded to the top of your library instead of discarded to your graveyard. So there's a lot of wacky stuff that happens with rules interactions, and some judges went into it pretty well. The big thing here is that people are talking about playing this a lot, but I don't know where I'm actually playing this for landslide. Maybe it's a 1 or a 2 of in a really heavy combo deck in Modern, but I don't think I'm usually actually wanting to run this or caring enough to want to give up my draw steps, because you don't get the card advantage off of it. You just get the card quality, and that's a pretty big if. So maybe it's a sideboard card in other formats. You can get it with Sylvan Scrying. Get it with Primeval Titan in Modern. You can get it with Crop Rotation in Legacy, which is pretty powerful if you want that effect. In Legacy, I could see it having the most impact just because Crop Rotation exists, but I don't know any deck that wants to protect its hand that badly for just card quality, especially since sideboard slots are so valuable. Still, an interesting card. The new Liliana. A lot of people are bashing it, but let's read it and figure out what's going on. Liliana, the Last Hope. 1 black for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker, and it's got +1 up to 1 target creature gets -2/-1 until end of turn. -2, mill 2, and then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And -7, at the beginning of your end step, put X 2/2 black zombie creatures on the battlefield, where X is 2 plus the number of zombies you control. So the ultimate sort of slowly builds up into this giant crescendo of zombies that kill you, so that's fine. Let's talk about the first 2 abilities. First, before any of the abilities, it's a 3-mana walker with 3 loyalty. That's pretty good, and it can go up to 4, so it's pretty sturdy. The -2/-1 is less of a defensive ability and more of an offensive ability. Now, you can use it defensively. It can pick off some creatures, but not that many creatures. But what it does let you do is take their 3/3, turn it into a 1/2, and attack your 2/2 into the previous 3/3. So, let's say that you played your Grim Flayer earlier. Turn 2, you played your 2/2, and then they played their 2/3. One of the many in the format. They played their Sylvan Advocate. Whatever they wanted to play. Well, you play your Liliana, the Last Hope. You +1, it goes to 4. Now they have a 1/2. You swing your 2/2 into their 1/2. Or, in that case, it's actually a 0/2. They opt not to block, because why would you jump? And then you get the card quality advantage. You get to decide that. You get to set your Delirium up. And they can swing back for 2 more, take Liliana down to 2. But then you can +1 again to 3, and she's still staying around for how many more turns until they get more to the board? Pretty solid there. The -2, how important is Delirium, and what cards are we getting back is really what's going on. Because these first 2 abilities don't look too good on their own, but I think in the aggressive Delirium shell, that's where she fits. She costs 3 mana, so that's not much of an investment, so any effects that she gets repeatedly are pretty strong. I think that she'll be played in lots of decks in Standard just because giving -1 toughness is actually pretty solid. The other abilities are less important, and that's unfortunate unless you need Delirium. Interesting last point, in Modern, she actually might be a little bit better because there's more 1 toughness and fragile creatures, and that +1 can repeatedly gun down many creatures few creatures stand up. Like, imagine a Jund build where you have just a Tarmogoyf and a Liliana. You can just start picking off Lingering Souls tokens, things like Dark Confidant, Young Pyromancer, Snapcaster Mage. There's tons and tons of targets for Liliana in Modern. We got a Legendary Spider. And we're going to talk about it because I think it's decent in Standard. 4 and a green for a 3/5 Legendary Spider with Reach. Delirium, when it enters the battlefield. Put 3 1/2 green spiders with Reach on the battlefield. 6 and a black, target opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control. So it's a callback to spider spawning, the same cost, same activation for the flashback. Make some spiders, but there's some things going on here. First of all, if you have Delirium, which by turn 5 you probably should, you get 6 power and 11 toughness across 4 bodies, and it all has Reach. That's a lot. It stops Avacyn, no problem. They bounce right off each other. That's good. And later on, you can just pay 7 and drain some amount. Now, it might not be a ton. That's fine. It is a way to have poor Reach in that it's going to slowly kill your opponent, but they do have to answer it. I could see it as a 1-of or a sideboard card, or a 1-in-1 in Standard as ways to combat various angels in the format currently. Collective Defiance is one of the powerful rare Escalate cards. 1 red, Escalate for 1. Choose 1 or more. Target player discards all cards in his or hand, then draws that many cards. Now that's target player, so it's you or your opponent, depending on what they have. Collective Defiance deals 4 damage to target creature. Collective Defiance deals 3 damage to target opponent. So you can spend 3 mana to kill a 4 toughness creature, deal 3, or cycle your hand, and obviously you can escalate them put together. That's pretty good. I really like the flex slot here because you can easily bin in a deck that's looking for either more burn to reach the opponent to help finish off the game, ways to kill opponents' creatures, but not every deck has creatures, and then ways to improve your card quality if the game's going long, but not every deck goes long. But this deck does all 3. It has you a little bit more reach, which I think is actually the least relevant mode for many of the decks, but sometimes it's the best mode because it kills your opponent. And then killing a creature is great against creature matchups, and 4 damage is enough to kill most creatures that matter in the format. And then the last one, or the first one, of cycling your hand, is really good when the game's going long. You can just kind of hoard up a bunch of lands or non-relevant cards in the matchup. And if you're running 1 or 2 Collective Defiances, it also lets you run a couple of cards that might not be perfect with the option to discard that card and the rest of your hand to get new cards. I actually think that there is some small amount of viability for this being maybe a 1-of in Modern as well. Just that level of flexibility is very high. Now, I'm not confident in the Modern saying, but I do think that Standard it's definitely going to see some play. Spirit of the Hunt is a werewolf enabler at 1 green for a 3/3 Wolf Spirit Flash. When it enters the battlefield, each other wolf or werewolf gets +0/+3. So the biggest thing here is it protects from Languish. Your opponent, you pass the turn, your werewolves flip, your opponent goes to play their Languish to clean up your werewolves. You play Spirit of the Hunt. Spirit of the Hunt does die, but the Languish doesn't do anything else. It's a 1-for-1. That's cool. You can also play it during combat. Get your guys beefier, have them defend against other creatures. There's a lot of situations where it's pretty solid. The real question is there a werewolf deck? If yes, Spirit of the Hunt's pretty good. That's about it. Providence is an interesting card. 5 white for a sorcery. Rare. You may reveal this from your opening hand. If you do, at the beginning of your first upkeep, your life total becomes 26. If you cast it, your life total becomes 26. So that's a lot of life to gain, by the by. If there's super aggressive decks, this could be a card that is put in sideboards. 7 mana is an excessively high amount, but just being able to sort of show this on your first upkeep and gain 6 life is a big deal. That is 2 ways. It's basically a full life gain spell, and if you have ways to loot it away, whether you're playing red or blue or black or green, actually every other card has discard outlets, and then you can get value out of it on both ends. You just need a way to make it a useful card because just casting it isn't that great all the time. Although I will also say, if you're playing a matchup where you need the life, the last one in your hand that you cast and go from 5 to 26 is pretty good spell as well. You know, the 7 mana, your life is 26 is awesome. Summary Dismissal is 2 blue instant, exile all other spells and counter all other abilities. Standard, it's fine without being super great, but the interesting thing is Modern and Legacy and Vintage may want this. This effect removes all of the effects from the stack, and it exiles the spells, so uncounterable spells don't get around this. You can just exile their Abrupt Decay right off the stack, and then countering all the abilities, obviously, is just the normal templating. Not sure where it's going to see play, but it is a powerful card, and some variants of this card have seen play in all sorts of formats at different times. Turn aside, Prey Upon's back, let's keep going. Working our way towards cards that matter. Tamiyo, Field Researcher, is 1 green, blue, white for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. +1, choose up to 2 target creatures to your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage, you draw a card. That doesn't say your creatures. That says any creatures. So when you play Tamiyo and you +1 and you choose both of their creatures, both of their, 2/2s, if they decide to take both of their 2/2s into your Tamiyo, you got a free fog and 2 cards from the one. It's not bad. So it protects itself in a very odd way. -2, tap up to 2 non-land permanents. They don't untap during the controller's next untap step. So when you play Tamiyo, if you prefer to just tap down 2 things, you can tap down 2 creatures, artifacts. You can't do lands. You're probably not going to do enchantments. You're probably not going to do planeswalkers, but you tap down anything you'd like. -7, draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with you may cast non-land cards from your hand without paying their mana costs. That's going to win you the game. Just flat out. When you can play all of your cards without paying their mana cost, that's going to be just GG. So the first 2 abilities are actually really solid. She really gets to mess with how people are attacking and defending. I will say this much. Tamiyo, Field Researcher, definitely goes into a deck where you're playing creatures for the most part. You don't want to be using her +1 on your opponent's creatures unless you have to. And the -2 is to get through creatures to prevent some amount of damage. But she's really just a creature affecting planeswalker. And then the last ability is super awesome. Definitely standard playable. There is some potential for this to be... I think it's just standard. I really don't think it can hit Modern. 4 mana, and the effects just aren't that large outside of creature combat. Alright. Distended Mindbender is 8 for a 5/5, emerge for 5 black. When you cast it, target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose it a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less, and a card with converted mana cost 4 or greater. That player discards those cards. So, basically, when you emerge this, you get a body and then 2 cards out of their hand. Now, it's not a guaranteed 2 cards, but if they have 3 cards in hand, some amount costs 3 or less, and some or cost 4 or more, or they just have land. So you're fine either way. You know, the best case scenario is that they have like a land, a 1-drop, and a 6-drop, and you just take out the 2 cards that matter, and they're left with a land. Very powerful. I think that this is one of the main reasons that I want to try out different types of emerge strategies, because it's preventing your opponent from playing multiple spells. Usually cheaper spells, if you're doing this, are removal spells or draw spells, and the more expensive spells are bombs. And you get to pull out both sides of the equation. You don't have to choose whether you're going to remove the Anguished Unmaking or the Ulamog. You can just take one of each. Again, this is one of the cards that makes me wish that it'd be a Modern Emerge deck, but I don't think Modern or Legacy Emerge is just going to be quite good enough, and the discard big spell half is actually even worse in older formats, because there's just not that many big spells. Collective Brutality, 1 and a black. Sorcery, escalate, discard a card. Interestingly, also good with Madness. Choose 1 or more. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose an instant or sorcery from it. They discard that. Okay, a bad duress is pretty okay. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Stops aggro. Target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Not great. That's more of a speed bump ability. The interesting thing here is that the first two abilities are extremely good. The decks where you want to kill creatures and the decks where you want to remove instant sorcery are usually two different decks. And you're overpaying for both abilities by one, right? I'd rather run Deadweight and I'd rather run Duress, but I get to run both of them in Collective Brutality. And if I want to use both of them, then I can just discard a card to make both of them happen. Probably a card with Madness, because that would be preferable. And it plays well with the Escalate ability, or a land later on. You don't need something. You can basically turn a land into any of those three abilities just to check things out. In fact, if you have extra cards or Madness outlets, you may just use the discard ability, even if you don't think you have an instant or sorcery, just to get information on their hand themselves. So there's a lot going on here, and at only 2 mana for possibly all 3 abilities, I think this card has a strong chance to see testing in Modern and Legacy at the very least, because you can pay 2 mana and get all 3 of these abilities extremely cheaply. Especially if there's some sort of like weird dredge builds that run some amount of mana, because that is a lot of effects, and getting cards from your hand to your graveyard isn't always a downside. Stormkirk Occultist is 2 and a red for a 3/2 trample vampire horde. Whenever it deals combat damage to player, exile top card of your library. Until in turn, you may play that card, and Madness for 1 red. Pretty solid. I think it's another card that's kind of pushing us towards vampires. Another card that you have to block, and the fact that you can Madness it out for 1 and a red is pretty strong. So either there will be a Madness deck, or there won't be a Madness deck. And if there is a Madness vampire deck, this is going to slot right in. Imrikul's Evangel is 3 green for a 3/2 human horror. And tap, sacrifice it, and any number of other non-Eldrazi creatures. Put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield for each creature sacrificed this way. So basically, just you turn small tokens into large tokens. That's where this is going to fit. Not sure if there's a theme or a deck for that yet, but you know, turning your plants into 3/2 seems okay. I don't think it's going to make it, but if there's a wide enough token strategy, it might be decent. Alright, that's one of the new flip cards that we are passing for now. Whispers of a Miracle. 1 and a black, sorcery, target opponent discards a card at random. Delirium, they discard 2 cards at random. So if you haven't played against Hymn to Turok, it's black, target opponent discards 2 cards at random. And if you haven't discarded a card at random, it's awful. If you keep a reasonable hand of 7 cards and has 3 lands and 4 spells, and you play turn 1 land and your opponent plays a turn 2 Hymn to Turok and they hit 2 lands, now you have a hand that doesn't do anything unless you draw lands. That's not fun. Or if they hit 2 non-lands, then they've hit 2 of your spells indiscriminately, and you're left with 2 spells and 2 lands, which is also not great. The tricky part about this here is that it's only really strong if you can get Delirium. Otherwise, I'd rather be using targeted discard to make sure that I know what's in my opponent's hand. So it just comes down to how quickly can you get Delirium to make this card worth it. The upside is that it's 1 and a black. If Delirium's easily achievable, this could definitely be the kind of card that sees play in multiple formats. If Delirium is super easy to play, there might be a deck that runs Hymn to Turok alongside of Whisper of a Miracle. Hymn to Turok is one of the best cards in many matchups. Just basically depends on how quickly and consistently can you activate Delirium. Murder is back. 1 black, destroy target creature. It's not going to necessarily be super impressive in any way, but it's just very efficient. Oh, this card's so nifty. Lupin Prototype. 2 for a 5/5 artifact creature wolf construct. Yeah. Lupin Prototype cannot attack or block unless a player has no cards in hand. So it just depends on how quickly can you get no cards in hand, and how are you getting value out of discarding the cards from your hand or playing them quickly. 2 mana 5/5 is pretty real, and even if it has to miss the first attack step, it can still be quite powerful. I think in Standard it's a little bit much to expect this card to be good, unless there's some serious Madness outlets. I think Modern is going to be the place where this has the most potential. Legacy just has better things to do for 2 mana, but in Modern, a 5/5 for 2 could be great. Could see Affinity play, although I'm not too terribly high on that. And a couple other decks that can empty their hand out pretty quick. Eternal Scourge is 3 for a 3/3. You may cast it from exile. Whenever it becomes a target of a spell or ability opponent controls, exile it. So your opponent can't use removal to kill it because it just exiled itself and you can cast it again. It works in Legacy with Food Chain, where you can just repeatedly exile it and play it over and over for an infinite storm count and infinite mana, which is nifty. So the real question is, where are we using it? What is it doing? And I think this has potential to be played in many formats, just because of how powerful it is. Again, in Legacy, you could just put this right in Food Chain, especially if you want to play more of a beatdown Food Chain style. Some run more combo type, but I think one of the biggest advantages to Legacy Food Chain is the fact that it runs a bunch of creatures and can just beat you to death. And this is just another creature that's decently efficiently costed and beats you to death. And I think in Legacy, there's actually no permanent answer for it because almost nobody runs Wraths and almost nobody runs significant creatures. So, will it have a home in Standard? I think very easily it could. It's a good defensive card and it's a good offensive card. It's hard to get rid of in an effective way. Languish, I think, is really the main way that happens. Alright, so our next card is a card that people are super excited about, especially in Modern. Eldritch Evolution is 1 green sorcery as an additional cost. Sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, where X is 2 plus the sacrifice creature converted mana cost. Put that onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Exile Eldritch Evolution. So people are deciding if this is going to replace things like Collected Company, Court of Calling, and it can fit in those same things. Exiling itself is actually a pretty big deal because of because you can't get it back with Eternal Witness, right? Turn 1 bird, turn 2 Eldritch Evolution, get it. Eternal Witness doesn't actually get it back to your hand. But people are also super excited, and it actually has already gone up quite a bit for Allosaurus Rider, which we see is kind of peaked here at $3 online and $10 in paper, because Allosaurus Rider is a 7-drop that you can play by just exiling 2 green cards from your hand. And then when you play your said Eldritch Evolution, you can just go ahead and get Grizzlebrand. So you could have a turn 2 Grizzlebrand pretty conveniently. It'll be interesting to see if we see some sort of 3-type way to get Grizzlebrand online using Eldritch Evolution and other cards. I'm not sure. But it is a powerful card, and there's a chance it'll end up being one of the better cards in Modern. Greater Reach Sanitarium, legendary land, so that can be gotten with one of the cards we'll talk about in a little bit. Tap, add colors to your mana pool. 2 in a tap. Each player draws a card, then discards a card. If you have Madness, then you're essentially drawing 2 cards. That's very powerful. You can do it at the end of the turn and turn your bad cards into better cards while slowing down when your opponent gets to see these new cards as well. I think it's very strong. I think it'll see play in Standard for sure, and probably some Modern, and possibly some Legacy. Just filtering through your stuff in a colorless fashion is very powerful. Worf Infiltrator is blue colorless for a 1/1 Skulk. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2. If you do, put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi Horror creature token onto the battlefield. So that's whenever you do, not just for its ability for discarding the creature. If you discard to another source, you can pay the 2 and get your Eldrazi Horror creature token, which is solid. Cards like this are one of the only reasons I want to actually use the Nephalia Academy, so that I can discard a creature, put it on top of my library. Maybe we have an effect that says discard a creature, draw a card, and I can repeatedly discard that creature over and over to activate Worf Infiltrator. That doesn't seem great, though. Worf Infiltrator is kind of borderline. If there's a deck where you can really do some degenerate stuff with it, that's where it's going to shine. Don't see that yet. Decimator of the Provinces is 10 for a 7/7 Eldrazi board. And it emerges for 6 green. When you cast it, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample into the turn, trample and haste. So it doesn't, because it says when you cast it. It's an interesting card in that it is basically a smaller Craterhoof Behemoth, which came from the last Innistrad block. It's kind of a callback to that. It is strong. I think that it'll be solid in Standard for sure, assuming there's a token deck to kind of take advantage of it. In Modern, it's a little trickier because you'd rather have Craterhoof Behemoth, unless the emerge cost is what's making the difference. But then how is the emerge cost actually making a difference if you're sacrificing a big creature in your token deck? There's a lot of weird stuff going on. There's a strong possibility you'll find a home in many formats. It's a strong effect. It's a big creature. But the real thing is, how is it fitting into an archetype over Craterhoof Behemoth and over older formats? I don't think it is. Reprint of Donate, color shifted. Harmless Offering, 2 in a red, sorcery. Target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. That doesn't sound great until you realize you give them Abyssal Persecutor. Now they can't win the game. Or you give them our fancy enchantment that's currently out that makes them lose the game on the last option. So you use 1 or 2 options, you Harmless Offering, give them it. They have 1 or 2 turns to answer that enchantment, or they die. So there's interesting cards to go with it. It is a combo deck. There's already a combo deck available in Standard. I could see it seeing play in Modern as well. I don't think it's quite strong enough for Legacy, but Donate is a card that has been never printed in Modern for a reason. We've had creatures that do a bad job of it, but this is just a sorcery, so it's a lot harder to interact with. It'll be interesting to see where and when it sees play. But I expect Standard decks to play it already. Storm Kirk Condemned is black for a 2/2. It's a Vampire Horde. Discard a card. Vampires you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So that's a strong effect. Being able to take your 2/2 and just attack into their 2/2 and know that they probably won't block is great. The fact that you can use it once per turn to pump all your vampires is great. The fact that it is a free Madness Nailer is the most exciting part of this card. This is one of the main reasons that Vampires has a shot to be a great deck. Expect to see lots of Standard play. Still don't think it's good enough for Modern. Don't think Vampires is a Modern deck. Alright. Kessig Prowler is green for a 2/1 Werewolf Hoarder. 1 mana 2/1 sometimes makes it. And it transforms for 4 and a green into a Sinuous Predator, which is a 4/4, and it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. That's fine. The big side of this is that a 1 mana 1/1 is often good enough, and if it's good enough, then that means it can sometimes become a 4/4 to win the game. Let's keep going. More cool werewolves. Here we go. Wait. Oh, there we go. Voldaren Pariah is 3 black for a flying 3/3, and Madness is for triple black. The Madness triple black is the real reason this card is even playable, because if you can discard it, you're basically just playing black for a 3/3 flyer. If you sacrifice 3 other creatures, which is quite a few, then you get Abolisher of Bloodlines, which is a 6/5, and when it transforms, target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. So it is a 3 for 3. You do get a 6/5 out of the deal. You could have Madness in for 3. So there's a lot of potentially interesting things going on there, and the fact that you can turn 3 of your less than relevant vampires, because it's obviously the deck this would want to go into basically 3 innocent bloods is pretty strong. I don't think it'll see play anywhere outside of Standard, but again, if there's a vampire deck, there's a solid chance this will see play in it. My favorite Emerge card is Elder Fiend. It's 8 for a 5/6 flash Eldrazi Octopus. Emerges for 5 blue. When you cast it, tap up to 4 target permanents. That includes lands. So if your opponent tries to kill your creature, you can flash in by sacrificing that creature and tap down 4 of their things, probably the rest of their lands. If your opponent goes to attack for lethal and you don't have enough blockers, you can cast Elder Fiend before attacks. with Emerge or without, it's up to you, and tap down their 4 attackers, and buy yourself, hopefully, 1 more turn, and a 5/6 blocker to make the difference. If your opponent is going to be dead next turn, during the upkeep, you can flash an Elder Deep Fiend and prevent them from doing a lot by taking away 4 of their lands, which is a big deal. It's definitely standard playable. This actually may be modern playable. The big part is Emerge is quite a bit, but tapping down lands is pretty powerful. Not sure what would fit. Could end up being a sideboard card. Soul Separator is cool, but we're going to skip it. I think there's one more card that I want to talk to. 2 more. Bloodhall Priest is 2 black-red for a 4/4 Vampire Cleric. Solid. Madness for 1 black-red. Solid. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, if you have no cards in hand, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Those are all very powerful effects, and Madnessing 3 for a 4/4 is pretty solid. If there's any type of Madness deck, this will be played in it. It's not limited to vampires. Just a 3-mana 4/4 is very solid, and dealing 2 damage wherever it wants to when it comes into play is pretty good too. I think this is one of the stronger overall vampires. I think I would rank it right behind Olivia in just being very solid regardless if there's a vampire deck. There just needs to be a black-red deck for this to be good enough. Gisa and Giralf. 2 blue-black for a 4/4. Human Wizard. Legend. When it enters the battlefield, mill 4. During each of your turns, you may cast a zombie creature from your graveyard. So, it goes in the zombie deck, and it mills itself. So if you have a deck that cares about milling itself or about casting cards, it's pretty good. My thought is this fits best into some sort of Sultai Delirium deck that's kind of mid-range-ish and is using lots of cool effects. That's really the only place it's going to find a home. I think the actual zombie decks will have plenty of things to spend their mana on without using something like Gisa and Drolf. Stitcher's Graft is 1 to play and 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +3/+3. Whenever it attacks, it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Whenever it becomes untouched, sacrifice that permanent. So basically it plays well with Vigilance. If there's a deck that wants +3/+3 and has a decent amount of Vigilance, it could see some play. I think it's standard only. Curious Homunculus is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 Homunculus. Tap, add colorless, spin that on instants or sorceries only. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 3 or more instants or sorceries, transform it into Voracious Reader, which is a 3/4 with prowess, and instant sorceries you cast cost 1 less. Instants and sorceries you cast cost 1 less. It's solid for standard, and it's interesting to say if this is good enough for modern, because making your instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast is pretty powerful, although it is a delayed Goblin Electromancer. There is some amount of chance that this will see play in Modern Storm. Standard combo time. Tree of Perdition. 3 and a black for a 0/13 mythic plant creature. Defender. Exchange target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness. So you just play this with Triskaidekaphobia, and basically you set their life to 13, pass the turn, and they have a turn to figure out a way to gain life immediately or lose life immediately and die. Downsides to this card is that currently the pain lands exist, and you can ping yourself so that you don't die to Tree of Perdition. Still deck building cost to have to run them, but still pretty interesting. Other than that, I don't think it really has any home. We'll talk about you, Fisherman, later. We'll talk about Lone Rider now. 1 and a white for a 1/1 Human Knight. First strike lifelink at the end of your end step. At the beginning of your end step, if you've gained 3 or more life, transform Lone Rider into It That Rides as One, which is not just a metal album cover. 4/4 first strike lifelink trample. Very powerful. The reason this is really on the list is that it plays so well with Ojutai's Command. End of turn, you could Ojutai's Command, get back Lone Rider, and gain the 4 life. Since you met the life gain requirement, it flips. So that's pretty solid to just be able to get back a 4-mana 4/4 lifelink first strike trample. That's where it's going to go if it ends up having a home. some sort of blue-white humans or Bant human stack. I think that's standard only. Alright, we'll skip some cards. We're skipping a lot of cards. And head on over to Galvanic Bombardment. Red, instant, deals X damage to target creature, where X is 2 plus the number of cards named Galvanic Bombardment in your graveyard. Definitely playable in standard. You're going to see them all over the place. There's a lot of powerful small creatures, and they grow over time to kill bigger and bigger creatures. Plays well with discard outlets, plays well with Delirium, plays well with Mill. So, very solid. Probably won't make it to Modern just because Lightning Bolt outclasses it so hard. And on the other end of that, we have Take Inventory, which is 1 in a blue. Draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of cards named Take Inventory in your graveyard. So the first one draws you 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Again, if there's a Delirium deck that cares about self-mill or discard outlets, this can be powerful. If the first one draws you 2 cards, then you're doing pretty well. That's really where you need to be out. You either need to care about the amount of sorceries in your graveyard, or you need to be in some sort of self-mill or looting effect. Alright, there's more cool cards that we're passing. And there we go. We're going to finish off today with Unsubstantiate. 1 and a blue. Return target spell or creature to its owner's hand. That's it. It's an overcosted unsummon, or half the cost of the Evincer effect, which I've also seen on Brutal Expulsion. And both of those cards can be very situationally good. This is a card that can see play in Legacy, Modern, and Standard, and in fact is the worst in Standard of all 3 of those, because there's no encounter spells. Here, Unsubstantiate can bounce back the Abrupt Decay to buy you the turn you need to win the game when they try to kill your creature. Miracles will have another option to kind of stop uncounterable spells by returning that spell to their hand, and should all else fail, you do have a creature bounce spell as a secondary and sort of lesser mode. So I think that all that makes Unsubstantiate one of the more exciting cards for the older formats. Also, one more card I want to speak more on. We talked about it last time. Dahlias Lancers is 3 white for the first strike, or 3 white for a 4/4 first strike, and it searches up a legend. Currently in Standard, we have legendary creatures, we have legendary enchantments with spell effects, and we now also have a legendary land. So that means this gets creatures to go up in up in casting cost, or grab lands, or have effects, right? You can do burn damage from your enchantments, you can make your opponent sacrifice creatures, you can loot cards, you can get multiple creatures through tokens, you can get mana sources, whether you want to chain that through a Nissa, or you want to get it directly with the land itself. Dahlias Lancers is shaping up to be one of the most flexible cards in Standard. So if there's a home for sort of mid-range decks, Dahlias Lancers will be one of the better cards out there. Alright guys, that's going to wrap us up for our spoiler. I'll be back in just a second with a loot crate, and that'll be today. Thanks for joining.